Good to see you again on our channel. An amicable friendship between David Gilmour and Syd Barrett deteriorated into animosity and was later quietly severed. Even in his early days, Syd Barrett exuded an eerie air, despite his obvious charisma and exceptional talent. There was no denying his creative genius, but he was also incredibly unpredictable. Cooperation was frequently a finely balanced dance due to his sharp edge. Anxieties caused by Barrett's personality grew as Pink Floyd's star rose. Working with him was exhausting since his conduct was unpredictable and he refused to compromise. However, Barrett exhibited both vision and obstinacy, being quick to reject ideas and prone to angry outbursts. His once lovable eccentricities eventually drove a wedge between him and his closest friends and family. The steadiness that Barrett had been enjoying began to crumble as the band's fame grew. The stresses of fame and his compulsive LSD experimentation eventually took their toll on his psyche. As time went on, his stage performances got more and more wild. Refusing to play or sing, he would occasionally stand immobile. On other occasions, he would play a complete song on a single chord. This was embarrassing and frustrating for the other members of the band. It got to the point where it was no longer sustainable. Barrett had gone from being an asset to a liability. He was no longer inventive. The final straw was when, on the way to the show, the band as a whole decided not to pick Barrett up, a quiet but final decision that ended his tenure with Pink Floyd. Think about this. Pink Floyd is at Abbey Road Studios in 1975, working on an album that would eventually be dedicated to Barrett's absence. Wish You Were. The sudden arrival of Syd to the studio is a shocking turn of events. The charming, youthful person they knew before has vanished. On the contrary, Barrett has become a specter of his former self, nearly unrecognizable due to his weight, shaven head, and eyebrows. It was unsettling to see him arrive. He sat silently in the corner, sometimes making up words or giggling for no apparent reason. His speech was a jumbled collection of random ideas about life and music. He was so out of touch with reality that he even dared to offer becoming in the band at one point. The members of Pink Floyd were deeply affected by this experience, which served as a distressing and painful reminder of how drastically their former comrade had transformed. Barrett's irrational conduct was intrinsic to his character and did not stop with his mental degeneration. He had the potential to be rude, uncaring, and too judgmental of people. The jealousy of Barrett grew as David Gilmour took over as Pink Floyd's lead singer. He despised being supplanted and didn't try to conceal his contempt. His criticism of Gilmour's role in the band was constant, and he often accused Gilmour of taking his spotlight. Resentment and wounds caused by Barrett's passive-aggressive comments are frequently difficult to heal. He would try to dispel Gilmour's self-assurance by saying that Gilmour would never be able to match Barrett's artistic legacy. This was more than a business problem. It was a personal betrayal and a poisonous dynamic that rendered any possibility of reconciliation impossible for Gilmour. The band was completely unprepared to face the terrifying ghost of Barrett's mental health. Those close to Barrett in the 1970s were searching in vain for answers because mental illness was still mostly unknown and poorly understood. His unpredictable conduct was more than just annoying, it was downright scary. On one day, he would sit calmly and look attentive and clear-headed. On the other, he would stare blankly ahead for hours, refusing to answer even the most basic queries. His unpredictable behavior made any attempt at communication with him a dangerous minefield. Medications had the opposite effect. The late 1960s were a time of great creativity for Barrett, but he also began a downward spiral into paranoia and delusions as a result of his experiments with LSD. The same place that he wrote Vivid, Siam Cat. He now spoke incoherently about the shadows he thought were following him or the voices he claimed to hear in his head, with whimsical lyrics reminiscent of the gnome with the huge red nose or Lucifer Sam. Talking to anyone was a risk. Some would begin with cohesive ideas, but then fall apart into random jumbles, as if his thoughts had been lost in a fog from which he couldn't emerge. As his conduct became more and more unpredictable, he grew even more isolated. After vanishing for days, he would return at strange hours to unexpectedly visit the houses of old acquaintances, demanding the unattainable or speaking in riddles. There was an incident when he allegedly showed up at a Cambridge social event and started destroying furniture without saying a word. No one could decide how much he could endure, leaving his ex-bandmates Roger Waters, Nick Mason, Richard Wright, and David Gilmour with an untenable option. They made several frantic attempts to involve him and invite him back, but nothing worked. It was tragic to see Barrett so detached from reality. Once, he tried to present Gilmour with a present by offering him a container of what he said was gold paint. In reality, it was mud collected from a nearby puddle. Those who had earlier held his artistry in high esteem found these seemingly little moments tragic. Barrett was completely unrecognizable. His unpredictability was a side effect. His eyes, which were formerly piercing and humorous, frequently seemed empty. Instead of his usual outgoing and eccentric self, he seemed distant and engrossed in his own little world. He was extremely difficult to work with in the studio due to his erratic conduct. Barrett, his producers, including Gilmour, and the madcap himself saw the effects of his decline personally as he was producing solo albums. Barrett allegedly no longer liked the feel of the strings, so he would quit playing an instrument or even walk out of recording sessions in the middle of them. He made almost no difference even after he stayed. He would begin and end the same song several times, completely losing track of the lyrics he had written or the directions he had just given. Family and friends tried to step in, but Barrett's distrust of outsiders rendered their assistance futile. Despite being one of Barrett's first and most vocal supporters, Gilmour eventually confessed that he felt as though he was shouting into thin air whenever he tried to get in touch with him. Not even Barrett's closest friends and family were immune to his paranoia. He thought Gilmour was plotting to unseat him as bandleader, turn the other members against him, and erase his legacy. The claims hurt even if they were completely false. After Pink Floyd, Gilmour wondered if Barrett had finally felt he needed to escape the world because of him. Chaos can ensue even in the most ordinary of exchanges. According to Rosemary, Barrett's sister, he would accuse her of destroying his painting supplies or hiding his possessions when he would suddenly explode. He made treatment impossible by refusing to see doctors or even accept he had a disease. Syd Barrett had disappeared from public view and was living at his mother's Cambridge house by the late 1970s. The house reflected Barrett's deteriorating mental state. It was dark inside because the curtains were closed all the time and the grounds was overgrown. He had been the electric lead singer of Pink Floyd, but now he lived in almost complete isolation, haunted by the ghost of his former self. Strangers who ventured within his realm were deeply disturbed. There was a lot of disarray in his house, with unusual stacks of empty cans and other random items. Shattered implements and fragments of wreckage arranged in a manner that only he comprehended. Nothing worked to get his attention. Paranoid claims that others were attempting to steal his ideas or interrupt his thinking would take over conversations when Barrett was around. In his actions, he fluctuated between terrifying quiet and exploding fury. Became his sanctuary as well as his torture. Barrett would spend hours upon hours painting, resulting in tense, bizarre, and angular pieces. But then, as if he were trying to wipe his name off the face of the earth, he would slice canvases or set them ablaze in the yard to destroy them. Smoke billowed from the backyard on a regular basis, a somber indication of his inner conflict, as noticed by the neighbors. On occasion, Barrett would step outside, lurking through Cambridge like a shadow, staring down at his feet. His seeming lack of interest in his background or the individuals who had cared for him in the past was unsettling to those who knew him. He lived in complete seclusion, consumed by relentless paranoia. He became a prisoner in his own home, unable to escape the recollections of his past talent. The loss of Barrett's business was a professional and personal setback for Gilmour. Anger and shame accompanied the crushing realization that he had let his friend down no matter how hard he had tried. Barrett's brutality, false allegations, and refusal to accept reality had inflicted wounds that not even decades could heal. The value of Barrett's brilliance in light of the devastation it caused was an issue that Gilmour struggled to resolve. Was Barrett's ability to write music ever going to make up for the harm he did to himself and people around him? Gilmour would confess that Barrett's memories continued to trouble him for a long time. His friend, who had not died of natural causes but of a mind at war with itself, was always on his thoughts whenever he sang "Shine on You Crazy Diamond." It was a memorial song with a somber undercurrent, grieving the loss of Barrett and the mayhem he had wrought. Not only did Syd Barrett crumble, but he brought down everyone around him with him. His legacy of genius and sorrow permeates Pink Floyd's history in every corner. There was no longer any connection between Gilmour and Barrett by the late 1970s. Our once close friendship is now only a hazy recollection. Barrett separated himself from others. Any attempts to reconcile were short-lived and unsuccessful as Gilmour and the rest of Pink Floyd began their rise to legendary renown. Physically and emotionally, Barrett was unreachable. A short and uncomfortable meeting characterized Gilmour's last encounter with Barrett. It was as if Barrett didn't recognize Gilmour. He appeared cold and unapproachable. Their friendship was permanently severed during this last meeting. Syd Barrett and David Gilmour's story is one of tragic genius eclipsed by triumph. Though he was Pink Floyd's linchpin and a visionary, Barrett was a nightmare to collaborate with due to his volatile nature and mental illness. The breakup was traumatic for Gilmour, but he knew it was essential for the band's future. Barrett continues to cast a pall over Pink Floyd's legacy, even after all these years have passed. Both his impact and the problems he created are indisputable. The delicate balance between brilliance and instability, as well as the indelible marks left by relationships torn apart by mental illness and ambition, are all things that Barrett's legacy serves to remind us of.